It was a normal summer day in Ponyville, and it was also summer break from School of Friendship. And since Sandbar was originally from Ponyville, and most of his friends were from the kingdoms, so they all had to go home. But they all kept in touch by letters over through the entire summer vacation. But this particular summer, though, he felt lonely. Even he did had a few other friends who lived in Ponyville, but most of them had traveled away from vacation, so he felt a bit alone. But the only ones that didn't leave was actually his friends Applebloom, Screwdoo, and Sweetabelle. And but since they had their own summer camp to run, as they always do, since to help other Coles and Phillies to get their cutie marks. But he was actually offered to help them at the camp. So, but he decided maybe to give it a try. But after a while, maybe after about 2 weeks, he decided that was not nothing for him. So he decided to spend some time with his family. But unfortunately, he didn't get much spend time with his parents because before summer break even started, they all had talked to maybe go away for a summer vacation. But unfortunately, they didn't because since his father had to work a lot of the summer, so he couldn't get any summer break. And that happened to his mother as well. So Sandbar had to be taking care of his own younger sister while doing his parents was away from work. But luckily though, they had Fluttershy or Rainbow as a babysitter for his sister. Since technically Sandbar in his mid early 20s, so he didn't need any babysitter for that. But he always wanted to do something special for this summer. So, but since most of his friends were away or rather busy, so he had to try to entertain himself. He either went to the Sweet Apple Acres to see if they needed any help. When they said that they would need some help, he helped them as much as he could. And since the school was closed, so he couldn't go there, so he either asked Twilight if he can spend some time in the castle library to read some books, which she immediately was excited. Even after a while, he probably felt bored from that, but he didn't. But Twilight didn't take that as a problem because she respected his wishes. But after a while, he started to do almost anything else, like go to the lake, read some books at home, or to sleep a little bit longer in the mornings. But after being doing the same thing for almost 2 weeks, he felt quite bored about his almost same routine every single day afterwards. And he was getting bored of more about this. He wanted to do something special. He wanted to do something excited. Meet some other ponies. He told himself one night before he went back to bed, I want to meet some new pony. Maybe get a new friend. Or perhaps just have some adventure or something. And he didn't expect, though, that his wish would come true. But the next day, when he went to Sugar Corner to get something to eat, he noticed there were a new pony there, a stallion. He had never seen him before, and Pinkie Pie was just chatting with him. And after that, he left. Sandbar asked her who that particular stallion were, since he never seen him before in town. And Pinkie Pie told that his name was Feather Bangs. And Feather Bangs was a name that he had once heard before. But that was actually from Big Mac and Sugar Bell. That he usually used to live in the same village where Starlight once controlled. So he asked Pinkie Pie, why he's in this particular town. She said that he was there to see Sugar Belle, just to see how she has been doing it lately, since they were good friends now. So he didn't pay much attention to that. So we thanked her, bought some cupcakes, and went to the park. But even there, he felt lonely since most of his friends was away or something. But now, when he was at the park, he actually saw Feather Bangs just sitting there by himself next to the fountain. So Sandbar wanted to be kind, so he walked up to Feather Bangs and asked if something was wrong. And Feather Bangs said nothing was wrong. He just enjoyed sitting there next to the fountain. So he then asked if he could sit down, and he said yes. And from that part, they started chatting. They started talking about almost anything, like what he was doing in Ponyville, or about his previous life when in the old village were, and they talked about almost anything at that point. And soon they both laughing about some old jokes or any some embarrassed memories they had. Especially though when Featherbanks told Sandbar about his attempt to win Sugar Belle's heart during back in the village, which at the first point when he thought about this was very embarrassing. But after being thinking about it most of this, it actually brought him some laughter, and even Sandbar laughed. So they introduced each other as Sandbar and Featherbanks, which they had forgotten doing in the first place when they met. But after being sitting there for about almost an hour, which felt eternity, both decided maybe they could maybe do something tomorrow. Maybe just hang out, let friends, just do something. And since Sugar Belle was quite busy the next day, so Featherbanks hasn't any didn't had anything else planned. So Sandbar suggested maybe go to the bowling alley to maybe play some games or something like that. And since Featherbanks was okay with that, so they decided to meet at about noon at the bowling alley. But Featherbanks then asked Sandbar exactly where this bowling alley was located, because this was his first time there. So Sandbar gave him some directions, and by the next day, Sandbar went to bowling alley, waited outside by noon, but Featherbanks didn't even showed up. So he thought maybe that he stood up. But when he walked in, Featherbanks was already there. He was just sitting inside the bowling alley. So he felt quite stupid, thoughting of believing that Featherbanks was standing him up on this. But after all, they were just good friends, but he was giving Featherbanks a chance of proving that he can be a good friend. And when they started playing the game, both actually were quite good players. And at the end, Sandbar had about 250 points, while Featherbanks had about 200. And since they were quite good at it, so they decided maybe just go somewhere to have something to eat, just since they were getting hungry. And there they talked more about the game, and that's Sandbar said that he was a good player, which he said was in himself. But after a while, Featherbanks said goodbye that he is going to see Sugar Belle. And Sandbar just remained at the cafe for a bit longer before he going home. There he just sat down and read some books. And so for the next couple of days, they actually spent a lot of time together. Like going to the park, just hang out with his friends, or go to the lake, just relax in the cold water, since there has been quite hot days lately. So they decided just laying in cold water just to relax. But even after some time though, after about several weeks later, summer break was over, and Sandbar went back to school, and Featherbanks, he still remained in Ponyville for a bit longer time. But soon he was going back to the village. but they promised to get in touch by letters, which they did. Even during the summer break and even afterwards, they became actually good friends. And they actually were getting more closer friends. But then one day, Feather Bangs came back to Ponyville, but almost 2 months later to see Sugarbell. But then something did happen. Sugarbell and Feather Bangs had an argument about something, but they didn't. But they immediately worked it out because Feather Bangs thought it wasn't even worth to losing a good friend like Sugarbell. But during this time, Sandbar had been starting Jonah from the school. But before then that he decided to even ask her out, he had no idea how to ask her. And since most of his friends were single, and he couldn't just ask on some of his teachers for help because they would probably have their own different ways of being asked. Rainbow, he would probably said, just be tough and tell. Applejack would probably said, be honest and tell how you feel. And Twilight, she probably be doing some schedule or some list of how to do some steps to step. So he decided to avoid asking his teachers. And his parents, by the way, he could have had asked them, but since they were busy most of the time doing their work. But when Featherbanks came down, he had asked him because they were good friends. And Sandbar told that he was nervous how to even tell or even ask Jonah out. Since after the school dance they had, he slowly had some feelings towards her. But he was so nervous not even to tell her or even ask her out on a first date. Because he was afraid she would say no. Or that she didn't want to be with him as more than just a friend. But Featherbanks told him, just be honest, and if you don't ask her, you will never know if you don't ask her. So after realizing, considering all possibilities what could happen, Featherbanks was right though. So Sandbar asked Jonah the next day at school, and at most of his reaction, Jonah said actually yes. And after school was over, Sandbar found Featherbanks at Sugar Corner while he was talking to Pinkie Pie and Sugarbell, and he thanked him for about his advice and that Jonah had said yes. But when Pinkie Pie heard about this, she wanted to throw a big party to celebrate this. But Sandbar said no, because this was the first date. Because he didn't even know if this going to work out as a long-term relationship. Because he didn't even know if this first date would be a success or a big failure. He wanted to be just careful. And even Featherbanks had learned from some of his own mistakes. And learning how to trust is not to be overdoing his feelings. So he told Sandbar, be yourself. If anything goes wrong, just ask her some questions and try to avoid to be any awkward feelings. If you feel awkward, always try to find a way to stop the feeling. Even if it's hard at first, but always remember, you will find out. And on the date though, when they met at the restaurant nearby, Sandbar was so nervous. So he had to ask Featherbanks to meet up with him at the restaurant just before Jonah showed up, as moral support. And he agreed. So Featherbanks sat in the restaurant only a short distance from Jonah and Sandbar, more as a moral support or so-called wingman. And after a while though, when after this date about maybe 10 to 15 minutes about they've been dating, everything seems to going quite smoothly for Sandbar. Both of them had quite a lot of common interest, and they had a lot of things to talk about. But when he was looking around for Feather Bangs, and turns out only 5 minutes after, or 10 minutes after they walked in there, Sandbar saw that Feather Bangs had left. He was a bit surprised because he thought that he was going to stay there a bit longer to be as moral support. But realizing that he had been doing this date so far quite well without any extra help, so he thought maybe that he used to that Feather Bangs saw that Sandbar was handling this quite without any problem. So he thought to himself, "Thank you, Feather Bangs. Thank you for your help." And even after the date was over, Sandbar actually saw Feather Bangs near the park. And after Jonah and Sandbar had walked the separate ways for the night, he walked up to him and asked him. It was that he just left his own short time, and which Feather Bangs did confirm. After that, he did see that he was handling everything was quite well, so he decided maybe they didn't need his help anymore. But though Feather Bangs remained nearby for the next 2 days, just as normal moral support, and he even had asked for some ideas where to take her, or take Jonah from the next date. And the second date were to the movies, and next one probably to a restaurant again. And everything after was just going so well between them. And just before Feather Bangs was going back home to the village, Sandbar told him, "Thank you for your help with me with Jonah. If you haven't, I probably never been this brave or this courage of been telling her how I felt. And with your support and moral support, I probably never had this courage to even to be with her in the first place, like have something in common. But all Feather Bangs did say was, you did all that by yourself. Just you had been. I all said you should always be yourself, and you were. Of course, it's always normal to be nervous at first, but after getting to know her even better, and that after a while you get used to it, you don't feel the same nervous anymore." And realizing that, Sambar believed that he had a point. Because at first he was still nervous about talking or going on a date with Jonah. But almost after about 10 to 15 minutes into the first date they had at the restaurant, everything was just going well between them. They had a lot of things in common. They liked the same music, same food, and some things. And that was the only thing that he could ask for. And he even called Feather Bangs as his true friend. And that made him smile and said, "You'll always be my true friend, Sandbar. And you always want to have any advice or anything, let me know. I will try to help you with anything." And that's how Sandbar and Feather Bangs became true friends. The end.